Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates. The War of the D'Amatos. Their wedding was big news. Former U.S. Senator Alphonse D'Amato down the aisle with his new younger wife, Keturah. Now they're back in the headlines with an explosive lawsuit. Watch the nanny cam video that she says proves he tried to use his influence with the police to get her locked up in the psych ward.
Senator, you've heard that suggestion. That's repulsive. It's repulsive.
Plus, the White House now turning into a real-life game show.
You're fired. Go. You're fired. You're fired.
I mean, this administration has more staff turnover than a Walmart on Black Friday.
We're joined live by former Homeland Security Secretary Rand Beers. Plus, our shout-out. Inside one of the country's private prisons, the chaos and violence exposed by a reporter who went undercover after being hired as a guard for $9 an hour.
If you have a driver's license and are breathing and are willing to work, then we're willing to hire you.
From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. Tonight, a man with great power, now accused by his wife of using that power to get her thrown in the psych ward, with allegations of big money, financial chicanery thrown in. All part of an explosive lawsuit. It's the case of Keturah D'Amato against Alphonse D'Amato, the former three-term Republican U.S. Senator from New York. They were married 15 years ago. Alphonse D'Amato had already left the U.S. Senate, but remained a figure of power and influence in New York politics.
No one in this county gets elected or appointed without his input.
Now the D'Amatos are at war, divorce is pending, and the fight over custody of their two children has turned very ugly.
I feel really foolish that I didn't see it, but he kept a lot of stuff secret.
In a federal civil rights lawsuit filed last month, Mrs. D'Amato claims her husband used his influence with local police and authorities to falsely imprison her for 3 days against her will in a local hospital psychiatric ward, all to gain an advantage in the custody case.
They ended up taking you away.
Because
you were confined for 3 days. Yes. Is this, you think, because your husband has the kind of clout they'll do whatever he wants?
I know it is.
It all goes back to an incident at Keturah D'Amato's home involving police in September 2017. The senator's wife showed us clips from nanny cameras set up around her home that she says back up her claims. Mrs. D'Amato says she initially called police because she thought she might have seen a prowler on a back deck. At one point, at least 5 officers from the Nassau County Police Department were inside the house, apparently concerned there was a weapon somewhere in the house.
So the 911 operator said, "Are there any weapons in the house?" I said, "Yes, there is a shotgun lawfully purchased, locked and secured in my office closet."
With her arm in a sling from recent surgery, the surveillance camera clips show her pointing police to the closet where the gun was stored, and then an officer removing the gun, still in its original packing. D'Amato's wife says her 81-year-old husband, Alphonse, who soon emerges in his pajamas, then lobbied police to say she could be a danger to herself or others because of the gun, and because, he said, she was crazy off her drugs.
He lied about several things, but he started out by saying, "Oh, she's crazy, you know she's crazy," and so on.
Tom Leota is Keturah D'Amato's lawyer.
He then said, "She takes lithium." And, you know, we all know that lithium is generally taken for a bipolar disorder, which she does not have.
Does she take lithium?
No, she just takes Ritalin for a condition that she's had since she was a child, which is ADHD, an attention deficit disorder. That's all she's got.
But the senator said she takes lithium.
Right.
And that she's crazy.
Yes. And he also said that she had a psychiatric history, which she doesn't have.
Not at all.
Not at all. These are all lies, fabrications by him. And this is what led to the police taking her to the hospital.
Because of what Senator D'Amato said to the police?
Absolutely. That's what happened.
And he just made that up?
He just made it up.
All of this has been playing out in the courts in Nassau County, where D'Amato first began in politics and is still a revered figure here. When I caught up with him shortly before the lawsuit was filed, he said he was just trying to protect his children from his wife, who he said had a frightening episode.
It's about the well-being of my children, to make sure that they are in a safe environment and that they're protected, and that's what I'm doing. I'm fighting for my children.
There is a suggestion you're using your influence to affect the outcome.
That is total nonsense. I don't make sense of that. Now, how could I be doing this?
Well, the judges here all know you were a powerful
I've
man.
never met this judge in my life until we appeared. Never, in any way. And anybody who suggests that is absolutely mistaken. It's horrific. And I shouldn't be penalized because I gave public service for years. Yes, I know many people. But the fact of the matter is that this matter is being adjudicated on the facts.
I asked him if he had tried to get the police to think his wife was crazy on the night they came to the house.
But Senator, you've heard that suggestion. That's repulsive. It's repulsive.
Mrs. D'Amato was watching as I talked with her husband and heard his claim that she had had a frightening encounter.
The only frightening thing that happened that evening was the way he corrupted the police officers and got them to do something which they all know was not to be done. It was really not inappropriate.
So you're still fighting?
I'm still fighting.
As Alphonse D'Amato left in his chauffeured car, we could all see the VIP license plate on the back, number 8, a symbol of the power and influence he still wields in New York State.
We asked Senator D'Amato's lawyer to come on our program or offer any comment. We've not heard back. The offer remains open. But joining us now is Thomas Leotti, Keturah D'Amato's lawyer, who filed this most recent lawsuit against the former senator. Mr. Leotti, thank you very much for being here.
Brian, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Mrs. D'Amato talks about the secrets that he kept, and there's a reference in the lawsuit to forged checks. What's that all about?
Well, it's about the fact that in 2013 and 14, she found an account where Mr. D'Amato had forged her name to it and forged her name to certain checks.
Here they are. That's
She
not her
didn't
signature?
know about that
That's not her
before this.
signature? That's not her signature?
No, that's not her signature. These are forgeries. And unfortunately, it had $39 million in that account, which he had used for campaign contributions and personal expenses.
That's a crime, isn't it, to forge a check?
Absolutely a crime and should be investigated and prosecuted.
Is the FBI looking into this as far as
The
you know?
FBI is looking at it, and hopefully as a result of this broadcast, they're going to move off a dime here and do something about it, because it really needs to be done.
Mr. Leotti, there's also another video that Mrs. D'Amato made while she was in the hospital recovering from shoulder surgery, showing the former senator in a tirade against her, shouting about her with profanity.
Please stop screaming at me.
I'm leaving.
Please stop screaming at me. I don't know why you're doing this.
Please don't.
I said, please stop
You
screaming.
ignore me. You don't do
Stop
that.
screaming at me. Please, please stop screaming at me.
So, Mr. Leotti, what's that all about?
She had spinal surgery in March of 2017, just 6 months before this incident, 18 hours after the surgery, and Mr. D'Amato got on the stand and he said, "I love my wife," during this temporary custody hearing. That obviously is a lie. He's used to lying. That's what he does as a lobbyist in New York State and throughout the nation.
But why show this video? It's a custody matter, it involves the children. Are you going too far, do you think?
No, not at all, because he has indicated all along that he's never said a bad word about his wife. And yet, he broke his hand trying to assault her at one point. So she is a victim of domestic violence and fraud and forgery. And this is just going on and on and on, and the court is not doing anything about this.
And you're arguing that the court, that essentially the fix is in, that he's got too much clout there to have a fair trial in this custody matter.
Well, his son-in-law is a Supreme Court justice on the same bench where this case is being tried. His daughter is employed or was employed by the County of Nassau in that case where Ed Mangano was just indicted and convicted. His grandson is an ADA, an assistant district attorney in Nassau County. So his influence is far and wide throughout the state, throughout the judiciary. He engineered the endorsement of the course endorsement of this particular judge who's trying this matrimonial case, which meant that the voters had no choice about electing this judge who was rejected by the voters 3 times previously in judicial elections.
You filed this lawsuit in federal court, though, not in state court.
Right. We've exhausted every possibility in state court for the time being, although there are several appeals that are pending there. But we had to reach out because there are constitutional and parental rights that are in jeopardy here. Civil rights and parental rights are in jeopardy. Her children are being hurt by what this court has done to her since October 5th, 2017. It's outrageous what's going on.
And the name of the courthouse where this lawsuit has been filed?
Supreme Court, well, the federal court is in the Eastern District of New York in the United States Courthouse there.
And the state court?
And the state court is Supreme Court, Nassau County.
The courthouse building named?
Well, the federal courthouse is named after Alphonse D'Amato, and he's obviously been instrumental in creating the judgeships for many of the people who occupy those seats in the Eastern District of New York.
So you don't think very quickly you can get a fair trial here?
I don't know where I'm going to get a fair trial, but I keep trying. I want to have this case, the matrimonial case, moved out of Nassau County and before a different judge, obviously. We've tried that. We've tried to get stays and so forth. So far, we've not succeeded. But we're going to go forward with our federal action, notwithstanding the fact that I've been disqualified for bogus reasons in the state Supreme Court action.
Thomas Leotti, thank you very much for being here. We're going to stay on the story. Coming up, a former top Homeland Security official, Rand Beers, joins us live to talk about what in the world is going on in Washington. We turn now to what's happening in Washington at the Department of Homeland Security, where President Donald Trump continues to carry out a purge of officials that he says are refusing to follow his directions, whose legality, some say, is questionable.
To many, it seemed like a real-life version of some kind of White House game show.
You're fired. Go. You're fired. You're fired.
I mean, this administration has more staff turnover than a Walmart on Black Friday.
Joining us to talk about these latest developments is Rand Beers, a former acting Secretary of Homeland Security under the Obama administration and a longtime public servant in both Republican and Democratic administrations. He's now a member of the Board of Governors of the Middle East Institute. Mr. Beers joins us from his home in Virginia. And Mr. Beers, thank you very much for joining us. What in the world is going on in Washington at Homeland Security?
That's a very good question, Brian. I mean, clearly what's happened here is that almost the entire leadership of this very diverse department has either been removed or moved. We're in a situation now with an acting secretary, an acting deputy secretary. The department has 9 separate components, which are the guts of DHS. Of those 9, there are 5 who have acting heads at this point in time, and possibly a 6th who will be leaving from the U.S. Citizens and Immigration Services. While we've got a very good, solid civil service staff in this department, to take out the leadership on such short notice, to move it around, is creating an extraordinary challenge for the department. Now, Kevin McAleenan, who's moved up from CBP to run the department, is a very, very capable officer. He would probably have been the commissioner under a Democratic administration had Hillary Clinton won the election. That's how highly he's regarded on both sides of the aisle. But his experience in Customs and Border Protection is a far cry from running a department which is responsible for cybersecurity, disaster relief, the United States Coast Guard protecting ports and marine disasters, protecting the president and other issues. I'm not saying he can't do it. I'm just saying it's a huge challenge, and he doesn't have a deputy who's been there longer than he has, as the head of TSA has moved up to be the acting deputy secretary.
Well, Mr. Beers, as you know, it's a huge bureaucracy. What's the impact when you have all this turmoil at the top?
What you have is a career staff trying to keep the department from running off the rails. And they will do a good job of maintaining a stable course. But what they won't be able to do is make big changes in short order because the civil service bureaucracy is there as essentially the caretaker, but not really a leadership element of the department, except when they find themselves in these acting roles. And none of these people who have moved up have been in those positions before or have been close to being in those positions in the last 2 years of this administration. So basically what you have is a department without a clear leadership structure.
Mr. Beers, a quick question for you from the control room. A help you, Rhonda moment from Rhonda Schwartz, our executive producer. Rhonda?
Rand, President Trump says that it was under President Obama that the policy of separating children began. Is that correct information? That would have been under your watch.
The short answer to that is there were some separation issues. They were minor. The reasons for them would have made sense to most people in terms of safety and security issues. That's a far cry from taking families wholesale coming across the border and separating children from their parents.
Rand Beers, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We'll continue to watch this development. Your insights are extremely helpful. Coming up, our shout out for the reporter who got hired as a $9 an hour guard at one of the country's notorious private prisons and came out with this disturbing undercover video of what goes on behind those walls. And our shout out tonight for a journalist working for Mother Jones magazine who went undercover in a potentially very dangerous place, inside a private for-profit prison, a place that has worked hard to keep journalists and the public from knowing exactly what's going on inside their walls.
The assignment was to get hired as a guard inside this privately run prison known as the Wynn Correctional Center in Winfield, Louisiana.
Soon I'm going to be in there for 8 hours a day, and then soon after that I'm going to be in there for 12 hours a day. Oh, God. This prison is crazy. Beyond anything I ever imagined.
1,500 inmates, overseen by guards making $9 an hour. Mother Jones reporter Shane Bauer was quickly hired.
On one of my first day of trainings, the head of training said to us that at CCA we'll hire anybody. She said, you know, people say that we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, but we're not. But if you have a driver's license and are breathing and are willing to work, then we're willing to hire you.
If you really care about your staff, you're supposed to protect your staff.
Inside a place of chaos and violence, all captured on video by Bauer with a camera hidden in his watch that he smuggled inside.
I was surprised with how kind of bare bones the operation was. You know, there was very little staff. There were, you know, maybe 25 guards for 1,500 prisoners, which kind of leads the prison to be more violent than other prisons in the state. There was an escape while I was there in the middle of the day.
He went up the fence, got on the roof of the building.
The prison staff didn't actually know that he escaped for 2-3 hours.
Not enough people for security.
And Bauer says the prison company cut corners on medical care for the prisoners.
My first day in the prison, I met a prisoner who had lost his legs and fingers to gangrene.
Never saw a doctor. The whole time.
Bauer says the company is slow to send anyone to an outside hospital because it has to pay the bill.
If we want to act like refugees and animals, then we can do.
We're not acting like it. That's how we're being treated.
Listen to what I'm saying.
Hey, that's how we're being treated.
What kind of pictures you got there? They're my pictures. What you took here don't belong to you.
Bauer's cover was finally blown when a photographer from Mother Jones, James West, was spotted outside the prison taking exterior shots, and Sheriff's Department deputies demanded to see what was on his camera.
Right, you can't take my camera.
I'm gonna tell you one thing.
You hand me that.
I think the best thing to do is to seize this camera, and we'll get a search warrant, and we'll look at them pictures.
If you don't want to give it to me, I will take it.
We found out later that someone at the Sheriff's Department had searched James's video without a warrant, and on that video was an interview that he had done with me that day, talking about working in the prison. So they were able to kind of connect that I was, a journalist.
Bauer quickly moved out, calling in his resignation to the prison company.
I'm actually calling because I've decided to resign.
Bauer's stories in Mother Jones and a subsequent book got the attention of the U.S. Department of Justice.
And shortly afterwards, the Obama administration announced that they were going to stop using private prisons on the federal level. This, of course, was reversed as soon as Donald Trump became president. So now it's kind of, it's back to where it was before.
All the more reason that Bauer's undercover reporting is now so important.
Yeah, I mean, we have a rich tradition of undercover journalism in this country, and it's only in the last couple decades that we haven't seen it as much. And I think that we have a right to see, when companies are serving as public institutions, what they are doing. And if they're not going to allow us access, then we have to figure out how to get it.
In a statement, the company that ran that prison at the time, now known as Core Civic, said Bauer's conduct was reckless, could have jeopardized safety and security, and that he obtained employment under false pretenses. But on his application, Bauer did describe himself as a writer and used the name of the Mother Jones parent company as his employer. So that seems very much on the up and up. Most telling, the statement did not address in any way the appalling conditions Bauer discovered inside the prison, which is no longer owned by that same company. So our shout out tonight for Shane Bauer and Mother Jones for allowing Americans to see what happens when important public services and functions are turned over to companies whose first priority is to make a profit. It's not a pretty picture. That's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you back here again next week. Good night.